the Gibson J-160E. One of the most iconic Beatles guitars and one of the most unique sounding acoustics ever built. Its ceramic saddle, ladder bracing design, and laminate top contribute to its distinctive tone. This uniqueness played a significant role in John Lennon's decision to replace his stolen 1962 J-160E with a new 1964 model. The exact time and place where John acquired his 1964 J-160E serial number 64309 remain uncertain. Gibson's shipping log notes it left the factory on January 17, 1964. The earliest known photographs of it were taken on September 8, 1964, before their performance in Montreal, Canada, the 16th stop on their North American tour. Given this timeline, it's likely that he obtained the guitar sometime between August 19th and September 8th during one of the U.S. stops along the tour route. This new 1964 J-160E had several distinctive features that set it apart from both John's original 1962 model and other J-160Es produced throughout the 1960s. One of the most noticeable differences was the double ring rosette around the sound hole. Gibson introduced this design update around mid to late 1963. Before that, all J-160Es had a single ring rosette, making John's guitar an early example of this newer style. Another unique feature was the plastic bridge base. In late 1963 and into 1964, some J-160Es were fitted with a black plastic bridge base rather than the traditional rosewood. Instead of being screwed down from the top and covered with small plugs, the plastic bridge base was secured with screws from underneath. This design didn't last long, likely because Gibson realized structural issues associated with plastic and how it responds to climate changes. Despite that, there are numerous surviving examples still with the original plastic bridge base. John's 1964 J-160E also had something rarely seen on these guitars: an orange label inside the sound hole. J-160Es from 1954 to 1969 typically did not feature a manufacturer's serial sticker, but John's model was one of the few that did. 1964 appears to be the only year that featured the sticker, and not all of them had them. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of John's 1964 J-160E was its misaligned pickup installation. The holes that were meant for the pickup pole studs to pass through the body were drilled too close to the neck. To compensate for this mistake, Gibson filed down the top edge of the pickup shroud. They then placed the shroud in the lowest position, resting up against the pickup pole studs. This gives the appearance that the bottom point of the shroud is in the same spot as the rest of the guitars. This also means John's pickup pole screws had to be raised higher towards the strings in order for the base of the flatheads to clear the plastic shroud. Now let's go through a timeline of the guitar's appearances and the modifications John made along the way. After its first appearance on September 8, 1964, the next known sighting was during the Every Little Thing recording session on September 30, 1964. After that, it seemingly disappeared from use for over a year, not resurfacing until December 8, 1965, while the Beatles were in Sheffield during their UK tour. One possible reason for its limited early appearances is that John may have grown accustomed to playing George Harrison's 1962 J-160E while his own was missing. When we see the guitar again in Sheffield, December 1965, it had undergone a major change. John relocated the P90 pickup to the lower portion of the sound hole, likely in search of a different tone. This modification could have happened any time between September 30th, 1964 and December 8th, 1965. He kept the pickup in this position for many years. The guitar's next appearances include April 27th, 1966. seen during the I'm Only Sleeping recording sessions. June 1966, used as a backup during the performances in Germany. August 1966, used as a backup throughout the Beatles' final US tour, including their last ever live touring concert at Candlestick Park. In early 1967, the guitar was spotted in several notable sessions. January 1st, 1967, used during a Day in the Life sessions for Sgt. Pepper. February 24th, 1967, seen while recording Lovely Rita. February 28th, 1967, used during Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Just before the All You Need Is Love live broadcast on June 25th, 1967, John had the guitar painted in a psychedelic design by the Dutch art collective The Fool. However, this look was short-lived. It's speculated that the thick paint negatively affected the guitar's resonance and tone, leading John to strip it to natural wood. The guitar reappeared in photos on July 22, 1968, completely stripped. Just 8 days later, on July 30th, 1968, a photo confirms that the pickup had been moved back to its original factory location. This likely happened during the stripping process. When the guitar was painted psychedelic, the original pickguard was taken off. It's rumored that John had someone craft him a custom replacement. Initially, I had assumed that it was a modified Gibson J-160E pickguard or a generic store-bought replacement. But after extensive research, it seems most likely that it was custom-made specifically for John. The last known modifications to John's 1964 J-160E was the engravings he added during his and Yoko Ono's 1969 Bed-In for Peace protest. During their second protest at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, we see the first engraving John sketched onto the guitar, depicting him and Yoko in Amsterdam during their first protest. An incredible photo captures the moment on May 31st, 1969, when John added the second engraving to commemorate him and Yoko in Montreal. To make the engravings more visible, he filled them in with black marker. These engravings remain on the guitar to this day. Today, this guitar stands as both a symbol of his musical evolution and a testament to his passion for experimentation. Now to talk even further about John's 64 J-160E, I decided to bring on a special guest, Perry Stanley. He's one of the most knowledgeable individuals when it comes to Beatles gear, and he has one of the largest, most period-correct collections around. Some of the guitars he has were even featured in the Beatles gear book. Perry, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So now, Perry, your 64, you have that thing fully Lennonized. Tell me about some of the mods you have on it.
I think the coolest mod out of all of the mods that were done to make it look like Lennon's is that they actually did drill the place for the pickup in the treble position. Most people would be really ticked off if they got their guitar like that. I was joyous because I just took the pickup and moved it, and I didn't have to do anything to the guitar to destroy it or take a chance on it. And so now I have one guitar in the regular position, the bass position, and the other one, the modified 64, that one, the pickup is moved on it to the treble position. And so that was one of the coolest mods. And I guess the seller who got it from the person who originally owned it didn't think that I would like the fact that there were two screw holes by the edge of the sound hole, and took some wood putty and closed them up. But I just drilled right back through them because I thought it was so cool that I had already had that and I didn't have to worry about it. And the pickup lined up perfectly. It was awesome. The other modifications, of course, the most famous one that I don't know why Gibson didn't do in their reissue is the bridge, the pickguard. because the pick guard of the J160E is very different than the J40. It's not even a J45 pick guard. It's something else. Do you know what the? I know that you did yours and you found that guard.
I have in the video that people are watching prior to this, but basically what it is, it has to be a custom made one. Somebody made for John. I went through the same thing, J45, went through it all, couldn't figure it out, nothing.
I've never seen another guitar with that particular pick guard, so I believe you. And so this guy must have had it made as well, and it's perfect. And it has the plastic bridge, which is really cool because just to find a 1964 with a plastic bridge is cool enough. But when you have somebody who stripped it down and kept it, and it's got the orange label inside, a real 64 orange label. So it was just done so well. And I just feel so lucky to get that guitar in the state it's in. And it plays really well. But like I said, for finger picking, I actually prefer the 62.
Yeah, the wider neck, I wouldn't think that either, because same with me. For like Dear Prudence and all that, when I got my 66, I was like, wow, this neck is so thin. I love this. It's going to help me play Julia and all that other stuff. But I realize it kind of fights you because then the spacing isn't really that correct.
Yeah.
And I notice my fingers start to mute other strings. And I'm thinking to myself, you wouldn't think that. You'd think it would be the other way around, you know? Now, going back to your 64, you're lucky that one you have because that orange label, too, that didn't come on all 64s. It seems like that was kind of a hit or miss. It was only 64 that did it. And like I said, it was hit or miss. I mean, there was some that came with it, some didn't, even with the plastic bridge. It looked like they released that late 63 or so on the J160Es and into 64. But same thing, you can buy a 64 and not have the plastic bridge and still be around that same serial numbers as John. So, I mean, your guitar is a beautiful example.
Thank you. I think it's amazing. And people say, well, the plastic bridge is crap and all of this stuff. You know what? I would never take the plastic bridge off because it's original. And they were using the guitar with that bridge on it. So I want to get as close to the original sound as possible. If I modify something, it's going to be something that is either heading towards what the Beatles did, you know, like moving the pickup. I remember even when I was showing how to move the pickup, because remember, I didn't have to drill anything. So I actually did a video where I was showing what it took to move the pickup and how it kind of weirdly looked and all of that stuff. And I got some criticisms from you should put a Piaggio in it. And I'm thinking, why would I do that? The Beatles didn't have that. That's not what they did. I'm trying to go on a Beatles journey here. And, you know, it's not about like hiding the pickup or anything like that. It's about what did the Beatles do to get the particular sound, you know? So I was shocked that like, no, I don't want to put a Piaggio in it. That's not that goes against everything that I'm trying to do, you know? And since it was already done for me, I didn't think I was doing any damage.
100%. It's got to stay the P90. Original or nothing in my eyes. Now, the other thing I want to ask you too is with John having the 62 and then moving to the 64, and clearly he had a love for the J160E. What do you think it was about the guitar, the 62, that made him want to keep it? And do you think they're kind of the same guitar in a way, or do you see a drastic difference between the 62 and 64, feel and play-wise?
I mean, I really can't answer that with any authority because he might have gotten a neck that was similar to the first one, or he might have got something that he felt was better than the first one. Because I said those variations do exist. Why do I think he wanted another one? I think he wrote great songs and liked the sound of it, and the Beatles were using it. And of course, they also had that whole George and John matching guitars thing that they were going after for a while too. And then, you know, eventually they wanted to try something new, so they got the Martins, which is an entirely different kind of sound. And but the J160 to me is such a cool, versatile guitar because it kind of can do anything. And I think that was one of the distinct sounds of the Beatles was the J160E.
All right, Perry, so I know you've had a few reissues in the past. Tell me how those stack up against your 64.
I had the John Lennon reissue that was put out by Yoko Ono, and it was a 1999. In fact, the number was not, I had 99, the number of the guitar. So it was the first run of them, and I had 99, and I got it from the House of Guitars in Rochester. And it was a beautiful, beautiful guitar. And it came with a case that was just like a 64. It had the yellow inside. And it sounded absolutely fantastic. I tried flats on it, and I tried the rounds. I preferred the rounds. And I remember there were some little sweet spots in the guitar. So when I was doing maybe Girl, and I had the capo way up, I think it's the seventh fret, right? And I remember the A minor part in the bridge, and the guitar was humming. It just had a really great hum. Um, and it had a very close sound. It had the ping. I wouldn't say it had the ping as well as the 62. And I'm not saying that just because I have a 62. Um, but I felt that when you compare them both, after I got rid of it and I had the vintage ones long before I even got to the 62, there was something about the feel of the whatever they sprayed it with. I'm not sure it was nitro. I think it probably wasn't. Um, well-made guitar, sounds amazing. I had recorded with it, so it sounded great. Interestingly enough, I don't know whether I tried I Feel Fine with it. I would have. That's the one thing I wish I would have remembered. I probably would have remembered if I did that and nailed it. Because I did try that on the 64, and I did try that. Obviously, I did a video with it with the 62. Um, the profile was great. It was kind of like a Les Paul, but not too big and not skinny at all. Very comfortable profile. And, I don't know why they can't make things the way they used to in some ways. Like, the tuners were wrong. The tuners were like the ones they have on the 50s ones. No double, whatever you call that.
Yeah,
The
the double ring occlusion tuners.
yeah, thank you. They didn't have that. Then, of course, maybe I did it like a lot of people. I took off the truss rod cover, which had John Lennon's signature on it, because I don't want John Lennon's signature on it. I want it to be mine. And I found a black truss rod cover and I replaced it. I kept the other one in the case. It was a great guitar. It did probably have nitro on at least sprayed on the top, and I'll tell you why I think it did. Now that I'm thinking about it, it had nitro cracks. So it did that kind of cracking like nitro does. They call it checking. And I remember after a while, mine had a couple of little checks. And I was like, what's going on here? But it was fine with me. Played great, sounded great, looked great. The spray pattern was really good. I just think it would have been cool if they had the right tuners. And the other thing was, and this is just manufacturing differences between then and now in terms of quality, the pick guard was like a real cheap kind of thin slice, whereas the tortoise of yesteryear, the tortoise pick guard is a lot thicker and just feels a lot more polished and thought out. This is cut it, on a regular sheet and slap it on. So I did notice that. But in terms of getting to the Beatles sound, I think the reissues that, and mine, I think it was made in Montana, fantastic. I think they sound great. If you can't afford a vintage one, and even the reissues are pretty expensive now.
Yeah.
I think at the time in '99 when I bought it, it was I was able to get it for $2,100. That's still an expensive guitar, and but it was worth it because it was so unique, and to have it with the actual ladder bracing and the plywood top and everything, they followed all of that. I thought they did a great job. I don't know why they can't release things to placate the fans, like the famous one that's coming up. There are some differences there.
Yeah.
I want to get off track, but when they release things, sometimes there's always like one or two little quirky things that they don't make exactly like it. That really wouldn't be too difficult, in my opinion, to go and make it like that.
Yeah.
So you do a special tuners.
It's like they do it on purpose to drive people crazy.
Yeah, or to maybe keep the value of the other guitars up or something. I don't know. But it's just weird. But I did really like that guitar, and the only reason I got rid of that guitar was because I couldn't see getting a vintage one and holding on to a reissue when I had it's the same thing happened when I had the casinos. At the time I was moving up the ladder, and I would rather have had a 64 vintage one than a reissue one that was, and the 64 vintage one, even though it wasn't exactly Lennon spec because it didn't have the plastic bridge, the first one that I had, it sounded better. It did sound, it had more of that ping. It was a really comfortable guitar. And I realized, and it had a lot of patina, little smashes and dents and stuff. And I don't mind that, because I think it makes the guitar look pretty cool sometimes when you have that.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Perry, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you chatting with me about your 64 and all the Gibson J-160Es, and we'll have to have you again on soon.
It was fun. Thanks for having me anytime.